Welcome to the David Spisak Show. Thank you so much for taking the time to join me. Listen, in the spirit of full transparency, I do not have a guest this time around, but I am really hoping, I'm counting on the fact that what I'm going to discuss today is important enough and interesting enough, beneficial enough that you will forgive me for having that be the case. Now, I want to talk to you about happiness and the dealership's used car department. And you're probably asking, well, rightfully so, what do happiness and a successful used car department have in common? Well, for starters, they're both very elusive to many, in fact, to most. So history shows us that there's evidence as far back as 200,000, maybe as far back as 800,000 years ago, when human beings first discovered happiness. What does that mean? I don't know, and I'm not sure I want to know. I don't know if that means they're chasing dinosaurs or trying to kill saber-toothed tigers for food or for fun or what else they were up to back then. God only knows. I just know that that was the first historical record of any kind. Now, Socrates, if you move forward the calendar many, many years, back to about 500 roughly years BC, Socrates is famed for being the first known figure in the West to argue that happiness was actually obtainable through human effort. And then if you move up the calendar even further to 1776, you'll find that the Declaration of 1776 actually declared that all men, and of course women, have the right to pursue happiness. Well, we're well on our way to putting 2024 in the books, and the hot pursuit for happiness is continuing to this day. Now, the good news is that according to Ipsos, that's IPSOS, who's the global leader in market research, by the way, not a sponsor, just somebody who I trust in terms of their market research. Well, they have found, and they do this each year, by the way, but the most current statistics they have show that 76% of the people in the United States and 73% globally characterize themselves as happy. You got to wonder, what kind of market survey? Like, how does that work? Are they standing in malls and just, hey, are you happy? Are you happy? Are you happy? I'm just curious. Are you happy right now? I don't know how they do it, but they're a very respected organization. So I got to trust that what they come out with is relatively accurate. So if you think about that, roughly 3 out of every 4 people wandering this earth would characterize themselves as happy. Now, that's the good news. The bad news is that those figures are significantly higher than the percentage of dealers who say they're happy with their current used car department results. Now, why is that? Well, for starters, there is literally no department in a dealership that has been the source of more issues than the used car department. From reconditioning challenges to wholesale losses, inventory depreciation, the shortage of fantastic and what many would add trustworthy used car managers, to dealing with auctions and what is typically called the biggest of all issues or challenges, and that is acquisitions. Now, this last one became even that much tougher, more of a challenge, with the advent of very well-capitalized and process-driven publicly traded groups like AutoNation, Sonic, Penske, Lithia. Who else is out there? Goodness, I'm missing some. Group One, Asbury, and a lot of these other fantastic publicly traded organizations came on the scene starting in the late 90s and early 2000s. And they brought with them a process-driven mentality, also a focus on data, and finally, a commitment to training people so that they did the same things over and over and over again. Now, once they entered the fray, you know, it wasn't just competing with the dealers up and down your street. It wasn't just competing with mom and pops. These are big players that are publicly traded and, as I said, very well capitalized. Now, they were followed up by the disruptors. The big disruptors that we know of today still are CarMax and Carvana. And although Carvana, clearly most people, including me, would say they were on the ropes I mean, they literally were on the edge of darkness, it seemed, just a couple of years ago. But I don't know if there's a better success story, rather a comeback story, than Ernie Garcia and Carvana as of late. In fact, I would challenge anybody to find any stock that is rebounded more or performed better over the last 1 or 2 years than Carvana. I believe that they're up just a mere 150%, something like that. So once Carvana and CarMax came into the fray and they started selling, each of them, hundreds of thousands of vehicles, obviously that changed the game, not just on the sales side, but mostly on the acquisition side. Now, why is that? Well, because they knew that just going to auctions wasn't going to get the job done. Why is that? Well, I don't want to vilify auctions. Auctions are an important part of the retail automotive landscape. We've been using auctions for years. Many dealers have. However, Carvana and CarMax know, just like most really top performing dealers know, that when you buy cars at the auction, it changes the business model. It changes the outcome. The average cost of an auction car is much higher. Then you got to add transportation costs. You got to deal with arbitration sometimes. You got to add transportation fees. It also takes longer to get the car on the front line typically. And because you own the car for more, and sometimes it's not the ideal inventory, believe it or not, you end up with outcomes that are less than favorable. So when Carvana and CarMax came in the picture, they said, well, wait a minute. We can't just rely on auctions. We're not going to win that way. The math doesn't make sense. And they made the decision to actually go a different route. Now, CarMax really has to have the credit. They need to be given the credit. Because what they figured out is, hey, as much as we'd like to sell a car, acquiring a car actually can be far more profitable and much more beneficial to the organization. Why is that? Well, a couple things. First of all, I don't have to compete with a bunch of other hands being raised at the auction. Secondly, I've seen the data over and over and over again prove that cars that we acquire from inside the dealership, from clients directly, not only is the lower cost of sale a big plus, but in addition, cars that you acquire actually can generate more profit, sometimes double the profit or more than the car you're actually selling. You want to accelerate profitability, accelerate the growth of gross profit, acquire more cars. Don't just sell more cars. So it started with CarMax saying, hey, we'll buy your car even if you don't buy a car from us. That worked pretty well. Carvana then took it up a notch and said, hey, we'll come buy the car from you. We'll literally show up at your driveway with a check in our hand and a flatbed, load your car on. As long as you described your vehicle accurately, we will give you a value guaranteed as long as everything is as you said it was. And they literally started buying cars from people before they even entered into the market to buy a car themselves. And that truly changed the game. Between those two organizations, I mean, they're buying north of a couple million vehicles a year. Think about that. That's a couple million cars a year that are either not being sold privately or through auctions. And that, yes, has made this a lot tougher than it was before. Now, interestingly, this much maligned, misunderstood, and difficult to master department, despite that, is getting more attention, seemingly every day, now that the new car business is experiencing unprecedented challenges of their own. Now, this makes perfect sense to me for the following reasons. Number one, there are, on average, 2.5 times as many used cars transacted in this country each and every year as new cars. So for example, we may transact 15 to 15.5 million new cars this year, but we're expected to sell somewhere around 36 to 37 million used cars. That's how many will be transacted in the year 2024. We've seen as many as 40 million or more. Whereas the new car department, I believe the most we've ever sold in any given year was 17.5 million. So even then, it was well more than double. Secondly, as new cars have become less affordable, the market is bifurcated, with 100% of buyers being able to afford a used car, while compare that with maybe half or less than half who could afford a $400 car payment, which, by the way, is $300 under the current average of around $725 a month. This is according to MarketWatch, an article in MarketWatch, where they found less than half of the average household incomes could afford a $400 payment. So new cars, they're just not in the cards for many people these days. Used cars now have become the leader when it comes to what's on people's minds. What are they considering when they're buying their next car? Third thing, unlike new cars, there are little, if any, restrictions in the used car department. So I want you to think about this. So I can have as many cars as I want. I choose the volume of inventory I want to carry, the type of cars I want to carry, the models, the colors, the miles, the average cost of sale, how I want to price them, how I want to recondition them. And you compare that with the new car side of the equation. I know this is used cars, but stay with me. A new car franchise, if you're going to sell their used cars, that particular brand, especially if it's certified pre-owned, okay, now all of a sudden there's all kinds of guidelines, restrictions, things you can't do necessarily. You have to operate within a framework of their guidelines. So if you're selling just used cars, or you're focused on selling, whether as you're an independent or a franchise dealer, if you're selling used cars, most of those restrictions, if not all of them, come off. You could even decide how to market those cars, exactly how you want to do that. Number four, the reality is you are the OEM for used cars. You decide, like I said, on every aspect of your used car operation. So the only limitations are those you put on yourself or those that exist because maybe you don't have the right staffing, the right management, the right processes, the right discipline, the right consistency, and that's causing issues in your current situation. That's happening still to the vast majority of dealers out there in the country. And number five, this is a reality. A well-run used car department can be highly profitable while it seems more likely to find Bigfoot than a profitable new car department. That's without an F&I contribution. I would challenge you today, 2024, to find a profitable new car department when you pull F&I out of the equation. It is incredibly difficult. Yet I know used car departments that are having fantastic months, great success, and much profitability month after month after month. So the big question is then, how can you master the used car department? How do you solve for these huge challenges I called out earlier? Well, as a self-professed and terminally affected data geek, I have found that it's an absolute must to solve for the following 6 critical areas of a used car operation. I've had the benefit, by the way, of having the ability to interact, interface, interview some of the best out there, some of the best used car operators like Joel Bassam of Eastern's Auto Group or Patrick Abad over at Beaver, Tony Lucas over at the Koss Auto Group, as well as industry experts, some of the most respected, highly respected, and renowned experts out there, like Brian Kramer from AccuTrade. And you've got Frank Knox, who spent nearly 20 years as a buyer with CarMax. And many, many people, other people, Daryl Steed and Jason Rice, and there's so many others out there that are making a positive contribution based on their years of experience in helping dealers create a very successful used car department. So what are those 6 areas? Number one, having the right inventory for your market. Many would term this the ideal inventory, and I think that's fine. You need to have the ideal inventory for your market. That's based on, in your market, what is the average sales price of a used car? If it's $23,000 and your average cost of sales, for example, is $25,000, $27,000 or more, you're going to find it's going to have a very adverse impact on your ability to have a successful used car department. There's just not enough people in your market that are looking for, or maybe who can afford, a vehicle that has a cost of sale that is thousands of dollars higher than the market average. Second thing is acquisition and inventory sourcing. Show me a dealership that's getting 20, 30, 40, 50% of their cars from the auction, and I will show you a consistently unprofitable dealer. Now, doesn't mean they're not unicorns. There may be a dealer, one or two out there, based on their approaches. Maybe they're writing cars down. Maybe they use packs to write new inventory or old inventory down, I should say. Maybe they price every auction car at $200, $300, $500 over so they could sell it right away and face a much lower risk of losing money. And that's important because auction cars, when they're over 30 days old, the likelihood that they're going to lose money is incredibly high, much higher than a vehicle that comes in via a trade-in or an acquisition from a client from your service drive, for example. So acquisition is critical. It's a big challenge for most dealers. It's the biggest challenge, in fact. Third thing is reconditioning. I see dealers that to this day, it's taking 5, 6, 7, 8 days or longer to get their cars in and out of the shop on the front line. Why is that a big deal? Well, I just said, when cars stay around the lot over 30 days, on average, they are unprofitable. They're an unprofitable outcome. So it is critical to have as many days as possible to put that car in the market on the front line and get that car sold. If it takes you 10 days to get that car in and out of your shop, maybe even longer if you're waiting for it to get transported from an auction, that only gives you 20 days to get that car then off your lot with a fair and a decent gross profit on it. Otherwise, chances are you're going to spend an extraordinary amount of money, unreasonable amount of money on floor plan expense, on advertising, and it's going to also negatively affect your compensation percentage. Fourth thing, merchandising. How quickly can you get pictures, great pictures, up online for each and every one of your cars? I still, to this day, see dealers that don't have pictures or they're using stock pictures. When a prospective customer comes to your website and they see a stock image for a car, they're moving on past you. It's literally like they walked in the door and walked right back out. And I'm going to say something that I've been saying for years. I probably came up with this quote 6 or 7 years ago. If you don't win online, you will not win in the showroom floor. In fact, you can't win on the showroom floor. And what does that mean? It means you have to have the right cars. You got to get them online. You got to have the right prices, the right pictures. They got to be merchandised correctly. They've got to be cars that are priced right for your marketplace, and so much more. So this is critically important. Merchandising is oftentimes overlooked. Fourth thing, or rather fifth thing, is pricing. Pricing is going to dictate SRPs and VDPs. Oftentimes. So you could get a car that maybe you're not in as favorably as you'd like to be in. Maybe it's not the best. It's not a perfect model, perfect color, perfect options, or perfect miles. That's where price matters even more. You see, all things being equal, you need to have the lowest price vehicle on the market. You got to be at baseline, you got to at least be highly competitive. Why is that? Well, what if you're talking about a Corolla, a Camry, a Civic, an F-150, and there's 20, 30, 40, 50 of them currently on the market? And you say, hey, David, there's 50 of these Civics on the market, and we're number 8 or we're number 12. So we're on the bottom end. Well, my question back to you is, hey, could you find the prospective customer who's sitting at home and saying to their friends or their family, you know, as long as I get the 5th or 6th or 8th best deal, I'm happy with that. I've never met that person. Everybody wants to get the best deal possible, all things being equal, meaning same car, similar color, similar equipment, similar miles. You want to be on the low end. Why is that? Well, because whoever wins the VDP war gets the most leads. Whoever gets the most leads, yep, they get the most appointments, demos, write-ups, and you guessed it, sales. If you don't win the VDP war, very tough to win the sales war. Lastly, sales turn. You know, if you had a choice, we've been taught for years and years, many people, that you need to maximize gross in every unit. You want to mark up that car. Hey, we want to try to rip that car. We want to try to get it under market, whether it's at an auction or from a customer, so we could put reconditioning in the car that's needed. and then mark that car up so you can make $3,000, $4,000, $5,000, maybe even more. Hey, there's nothing wrong with that. It's a free enterprise system, right? So that's okay, except for the fact that the higher that you mark up a car, again, the less interesting, the less compelling it becomes. It may also affect somebody's ability to even get approved on the car. What if that $5,000 markup requires a much larger down payment and they don't have it? Well, for that reason alone, that car will not get sold. And what if it takes another 2, 3, 4 weeks or longer for the next prospective buyer? Well, guess what? What was a $5,000 deal can quickly turn into a $2,000, $1,000 deal, or even worse, a negative gross profit. Pricing matters. In fact, I would say to you, the things that matter most in terms of a successful used car department: ideal inventory, acquiring from the right sources, pricing those cars right, and not falling in love. In fact, if you want to maximize gross, stop thinking about gross. Think about sales turn. You want to maximize gross profit, you must maximize turn. You're much better off taking $20,000, buying a car, selling it in 15 days, and having the opportunity to do that 12, 15, 18 more times in the course of a year. That's going to give you a much greater ROI overall than making $3,000 on a car and doing that 4 or 5 or 6 times a year. Do the math, and if you want to challenge me on that, I'd be happy to jump on a Zoom and take you through the math myself. So here's the thing. Literally every single top-performing used car operator, used car expert, industry expert will say the very same thing. It's always about those 6 things. So is it that easy just to master those 6 things? Well, yes and no. Yes, in terms of if one solves for those 6 critical areas, sustainable success is absolutely possible, if not even predictable. But no, it is simply not that easy, unfortunately. But as one who sincerely does like to do everything possible to bring a little happiness into this world, I can give you hope, because the answers you need are backed by data. In fact, I could show you with your very own data. Backed by data, based in science, and driven by proven strategies and processes. If you want proof, look no further than CarMax, who's been around for more than 2 decades, and month after month, year after year, and yes, decade after decade, they are proving that great processes, training, and discipline, along with great client experiences and a focus on acquiring cars, is a big-time winning strategy. You want better news? They're far from the only ones that are achieving that these days. There are legendary dealers delivering incredible results in volume, gross profit, and most importantly, net profit, month after month, year after year, and I will bet they will be decade after decade. So this proves it absolutely can be done. It again goes back to mastery, to solve for those 6 areas that are required for sustainable success. I use the word solve, by the way, because I think that once somebody has been trying to achieve something year after year, decade after decade, whether it's a dealership or our entire industry, we need solutions. This must be solved. So I will be gathering the most successful used car dealers in the country, along with leading experts in every one of those 6 areas. And I'm going to ask them to join me for a very special virtual event. So we did a disruptive forces and retail automotive event back in January, and that one was focused on EVs. And man, I'm sure glad we did that. Better yet, more importantly, our dealers across the country were so glad we did it. Look where we were last year in terms of where everybody thought EVs were going. And I was saying the complete opposite. We brought in the best and the brightest in the industry. And thank goodness, because it allowed dealers to have the insight, the information, the real information they needed to make decisions that were in their intelligent best interests. And where are we today with EVs? Well, nowhere close to where anybody thought we would be just a year ago. The good news, at least, is we are seeing EVs sell provided that there are some fantastic leases or other incentives that are making it compelling enough for people to get off the couch and say, I'll take a shot on an EV versus an ICE vehicle. This time around, our Disruptive Forces in Retail Automotive event is simply titled Used Cars Solved. And by bringing together the best and the brightest from industry experts to technology innovators, and most importantly, the dealers that are making this happen month after month and year after year, you're going to learn in just a short amount of time, one day, literally one day, in a handful of hours, how to solve for each and every one of those 6 critical areas so that you can also master your used car department. So stay tuned for additional podcasts that will touch on each one of these 6 areas individually. And I will try to have special guests join me so that they can also bring some important insights, feedback, and strategies as well that you could use in your dealerships to help up-level your results and your team. If you have any questions that you want answered or you need help with your used car department, please feel free to DM me on LinkedIn or connect with me by going to davidspisak.com. You could find information on how we can connect either via cell, email, of course, via LinkedIn as well. Now, I'll be happy to do everything that I can to help you finally solve this important challenge and create a highly profitable used car department regardless of what kind of external factors are in place, such as the economy, the political landscape, interest rates, the new car market environment, or anything else. It's time. We've waited long enough. And I don't know where you are with regards to your pursuit of happiness, but I can promise you something. You are going to get to be a whole lot happier with your dealership operations and your prospects for future-proofing your store for years to come by mastering your used car department. Thanks so much for taking the time to join me today. As always, please take the time, if you would, be so kind, to share this episode out with anybody who's looking to master their used car department. As always, I would appreciate any comments you have, good, bad, or ugly. I learn from them all, and I'll look forward to seeing you next time on the David Spisak Show. Thanks so much.